about the engineering of this work in these two Society of Petroleum Engineer papers. So you can take a look to get a more depth overview of the drilling engineering part of it. But today's talk, I'm going to focus more on the software side of the development. Okay, so just a quick note on how the current practice is in the field. So if you want to correct for your trajectory, usually you have the driller, which is depicted by this person there, and usually you have another guy or girl behind him that's going to give the directional path, right? So essentially say, okay, like slide or deviate your trajectory like some feet in this direction. And usually the time that they have to do this calculation during a drilling connection, which when they stop every 90 feet to correct the trajectory. And that means is like, since we are limited on time, because in drilling time is money, right? So there's so many calculations that this person can do at this given limited time. And then the question is, are we really picking the best option to our trajectory, given the limited time that you have an option to explore? So with that, the developed solution, we want to get the current practices in the field right now and just use the power of computers to essentially check much more paths and faster. So that's exactly what we are accomplishing here. So now that I covered like the business idea and the problem, let's talk about the particle swarm optimization. So swarm optimization algorithms is a class of algorithms that I think they were developed in the early 90s. And the idea is some psychologists, statisticians, and mathematicians, they were observing nature and some behavior, like why some animals, they can seem like they all know where to go and the optimum place to be. So they were started to study natural behavior, and then they came up with these algorithms. So the way they work, we have a swarm of particles that they have a position in space and also a direction that is represented by the arrows, those vectors. And then you have a particles place that you want to explore. And it's important that it has to be finite because, of course, you don't want to explore all the possibilities, right? So the step one here in the algorithm, you just place the particles in your space. And then next, you have a function that you wanted to minimize and solve, and then you put inside the particle space the values of that function. So in this example, we know, but most of the times you don't know what it is, and that's exactly what you're trying to find, the minimum of this function. So once you've done that, you have your particles inside your function space. Then you compute the value of that given particle in that function. And now you know, okay, so now that I have the results, I know which one is the global best particle. And with that, you said, okay, now that I know where my best is, I'm going to move all my particles slightly closer to that global best, and then do it again. And then you repeat until it converges to the optimal solution. So as you can see in the animation, this is exactly how it does. And you can see like mimics, for example, like some ants when you drop like crumbs of food or something. So that's exactly what they're trying to mimic here. And another important point that I want to raise is you can see some particles, they got stuck in global minimums, not the optimum minimum. But that's not a problem because as long as you have enough particles, they are going to find the global minimum, which is right here. You're good. And that's exactly what we are doing here. Okay, so now that we understand what particle swarm optimization is and how it works, how did we brought back to our domain here, directional drilling, right? So we have the current bit position here that's coming from Corvus bit projection app every 30 seconds. And then we have the particle space, which is this box that we put essentially the drilling window around the well plan, right? And then we place the particle inside that space, and then we compute the path from the current position to that particle, and then we do the same iteration. So as you can see here now at the end of the optimization, most of the particles are closer to the best one, and then we output that path that we say, okay, this is the best path to get back to plan, to go and drill it. Okay, but then to develop this algorithm, we had to first answer some questions. So for example, if you think about it, like where you are right now, and just pick one particle, for example, we can literally draw and fit an infinite number of paths from 2 points, right? So our computer doesn't know that. So we have to limit the possibilities for the computer to calculate the path from A to B in order to be efficient. So the first thing that we did, we limited the models, the path that we're going to calculate from the particle, the current position to the particle. And then we use three models. So I have a representation here of the most complex one, which we call the curve, tangent curve. And that is just because we have one segment that is curved, we're essentially like going to slide. And then the tangent segment, we're going to go straight ahead. Then another segment, final close to your target to align your trajectory. So we have the curve tangent curve, we have the tangent curve, and the curve tangent models. So what we are doing for every particle, we are calculating these three models from the current position to that particle. And we do for every single particle. Okay, now that the computer learned like how to get there, another question is when to stop. So we have to have a target, a quality measure to say, okay, now this is good enough, let's stop and return. So we accomplish that by an objective function, which is described here. And mainly, all it is, we have three main components. The first component is the ROP component, which in drilling is the rate of penetration or the speed that you drill, right? So we want to maximize that variable. And on second, we have the cost of the window. It essentially is how much of the path that we are recommended is inside the drilling window or the area that we want to be in. So we want to minimize the footage outside the window and conversely maximize the footage inside. And lastly, we have the tortuosity variable, which is how tortuous the wellbore is. And that is important because we want the well to be as straight as possible so you can run tools inside and don't have drilling problems, hole cleaning problems, and things like that. So we first developed this equation, but also you can see in the yellow terms are weights for each objective. And we did that because we understand that customers may have different objectives depending on where they are in the well or in different wells. So what that lets you do is those yellow weights right here, they are controlled by this ternary diagram. So you can, in the app's user interface, you can select the points here that combine all these three parameters, and then you can fine-tune the algorithm to your objective. Maybe you want to get back to pump faster, so you care less at this moment with tortuosity, for example. Or conversely, you want to maximize your production, so your footage inside the zone, so you want your cost, window cost to be higher, etc. So users have the ability to explore this function if you build it that way. And lastly, I think a question that you may be thinking is, okay, so how many particles do I need to have this be efficient, right? So we did like an experiment here, and I'm going to show you. So we have in the x-axis the number of particles, we have 100 to 300. On the left axis, we have the time per path, which essentially we just took the time that it took for a given run and then divided by the number of paths that you computed. And remember, this is not the number of particles, because for each particle, we compute 3 paths according to these models that I explained. And the blue curve, it's represented the average running time, the full time. So this is something interesting. Like if you look at the 100 particles, you get about 30 seconds to run, and this is the average time per particle in seconds. And then as you increase the number of particles, the overall time per path decreased. And why is that? Because when we speed up the algorithm, there are some things that we have to do regardless of the number of particles, and that takes a fixed amount of time. And then the rest of the time is to compute the every particle. So you can see that if you increase the number of particles from 100 to 150, you're actually getting more efficient. And that goes, it's true until 200 particles. So after that, you can see here that the average time actually increased, less proportion to the number of the results that you're getting, which tells us that the optimum number of particles for our case is 200, as you can see, like the optimum value. And that's what we decided to go with. Okay, so here's just a visualization in case you're curious how this works in the real life. So we have the red dot, the current bit position, and the blue dots represent the swarm. So this is how it looked like. So we have the fixed space around the wellbore where we want to be, and we are checking the path for each one. Okay, and now the last time part of my talk, I want to know tell you how we implemented this logic into Corva. So in order for us to use this algorithm, we have to think about in 3 things. The first one is the input to the algorithm. And as I said, we have the bit projections, which are the calculations of where you are. And these come every 30 seconds. And also, as we know in the field, for every stand or every connection, we have also the survey, which essentially tells you where you are. So we update the projection model at every survey, which Usually it happens at about 90 feet. So now that we have these inputs, we have to design or say, okay, when do we trigger the PSO algorithm to return a new recommendation path for you? So one thing that we definitely know for sure is every time that we have a new survey, essentially a new ground truth from your wellbore, right? We want to update the recommendation path because you have more precise data. So that's how the algorithm does. So as soon as we get a new survey, automatically triggers the swarm optimization to give you an updated path. The same thing, for example, if your current wellbore position is getting out of track, we want to correct that and fix it. So we are not doing every 30 seconds, but if some conditions are found in real time, then we are able to correct it. And also when you're exiting the drilling window. So this is for the automatic triggering of the particle swarm optimization, but also we wanted the user to have the power to change anytime we want. So in that case, they can explore that ternary diagram that I showed you, and then you can experiment with the results until you're happy, and then you can compare the two paths and select the one you want. So this algorithm has to be triggered on demand as well. So if you put kind of an architecture here, a very simplified model, this is how the structure looks like. So on the left side, you have the real-time side of things. So you have the rig sensor coming every second. And then we have this directional lambda function, which runs in the cloud. It's what we call the scheduler app. It runs every 30 seconds, as I said. So when the data gets here, after every 30 seconds, we do a new bit projection calculation. And then we check this logic here, the automatic portion, to check if you need to run the PSO. If that comes, yes, you need to run. And then you go back to the other side, on the on-demand side, and we run the particle swarm optimization code, which is a task app or by demand. So when we process that and we get the results, it automatically goes back to the real-time app. In this case, we have an aggregation module that is going to read the recommendation and say, hey, we have a new recommendation, update the UI, and tell the user, now you have a new path to compute. So this is like a high-level architecture of the system. And as you can see here, the last thing is the manual trigger, which is a UI button that the user can also trigger the PSO code or the task app, and then it's going to talk back to the real time. So lastly, I want to show, like, if you go to the Web Center right now, on the second screen, after you select if there's front-end or back-end app, this is what you're going to see. So for the left side, the real time, the scheduler app, like you can set, for example, 30 seconds, as you said, as I said, and this is the type of app that you're going to need to build this type of application. And on the on-demand side, it is a task app. So I think now that we understand how it works and how to build, this is like the way to go if you want to get more complex algorithms and essentially like one app talking to the other to combine into one single product with a more complex logic. And my final slide here is just to show you like how that task app works. So this is essentially, for every line, we have one path calculated. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but every line, so they run, I think, 6 to 8 lines per second. So if you remember my slide when I said that the objective here is to empower the computers to expand the path that you're checking, this is what I mean. Like, so a human would never be able to calculate that many paths in this time. So I think that's just like to see how this goes. Like, to me, was the first time I saw, oh my God, like this went well. So I don't know, it would be cool. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'm glad to take any questions. Thank you very much.